it comes out. Do you know what I mean? Like, this is really the problem. And so the person using a lot of words, especially some anxious talk, nervous laughter, that could just be a defense mechanism to really get to the point.
Okay. Do you guys have any?
Oh yeah. How does a child grow up in a family without either a father figure or a mother figure? What is some of the leading reactions, or how they, their social skills and stuff like that? How does that progress throughout their life?
Well, hopefully if they don't literally have a mother or father, like biological or adopted, they create one.
Okay.
Well, hopefully the adults in their life would create it for them, right? But if not, then children would themselves, yeah. When you had asked about second marriages or out of wedlock kind of things earlier, so if a child has, let's say, I'm just going to say mom, and say it this way, but it can happen both. So if a kiddo's growing up with mom, and there's continually people in and out of their life, I don't say typically, but maybe often, sometimes, the man will say, I'm not the father figure. I'm not doing any parenting here. I'm not the father figure. You couldn't tell that kid that. That kid is probably saying, my mom and dad, blah, 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 blah. My dad said, my dad does this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the kid creates that role, even if the parent doesn't. Many kids call their grandpas dads. And are they? Yeah, I wouldn't argue with them.
So their male figure in their life, that's placement of.
Same way they might call a family friend or a neighbor uncle. Right? So kids can or tend to create those roles themselves. Yeah. Ideally, someone would create it for them and say, I'm your mother, right? Or someone would take that fatherly role. But if not, the kids do it.
How are a child's social skills affected by divorce? Do they normally become more hostile towards other people, or fearful, or do they just feel like they can't make a solid relationship with other people?
That is somewhat a teenage to adult concept. Like, my parents got divorced, I don't trust it, I don't trust anybody, I'm certainly not going to do that, I'm not going to ever get married. I don't think small children think of it in that way. Again, more insecurity with young kids. Yeah.
Does a parent's divorce make children more likely to have divorces in their future lives? Like, if a child's parents divorced, the child marries later in his life, do they more tend to get divorced?
Again, that's a research question.
Okay.
Because I would have had to seen someone considerable amount of time to know about that. So that's kind of a social question and more of a research question.
Sure.
So kids say two ways though, right? Either I had already said before, like, I'm not going to do that. I've had kids come from divorced families that say, I'm going to make it work no matter what.
Yeah.
I'm going to go the extra mile. We're going to go to pre-marriage counseling. We're going to go to this, the first sign of trouble. They're like hyper-vigilant, right? Like, that's not going to happen to me. I'm not going to do that to my kids. Other people are like, I survived divorce, so will my kids. Right? Yeah.
Could you talk about the issues again, just so we have it where you're talking about the attachment issues, trusting someone, you're talking about the lacking of parenting, ODD, and stuff like that.
Okay, we were talking about in a child of divorce, what are, you didn't use the word common, but you asked sometimes what I see about family, about kiddos who lose one parent during the divorce and maybe doesn't have that relationship anymore, the impact. And so we were talking about attachment issues, learning to attach, and that certainly would come in later with trust about other relationships. I think when we were talking about parenting, I mentioned sometimes ODD, which is oppositional defiant disorder, because typically when you let a kid do whatever they want, let's say we were talking about single moms or out of wedlock or young moms maybe, and they're trying to figure out how to parent, then when the kid's 8, 10, 12, you can't say, oh no, these are the rules, this is what's going to happen, because the child will most likely come back saying, yeah, I don't think so. And so unfortunately then they get labeled ODD when they've been kind of brought up to be that way. They've been trained, you know, to, many kids learn how to cook their own dinner, do their own laundry, and they're still in elementary school, right?
Okay.
And typically kids in, I don't know, middle school somewhere, or high school, parents are like, okay, you gotta learn this before you move out, right?
Yeah. So, because with, what is ODD exactly?
Oppositional defiant disorder. There's a list of things to meet that criteria, but basically talks back to adults, won't follow the rules. You get it, that kind of...
Rebellious.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in a school situation, they'd be the one causing problems in the classroom, not following through with things. But at home, it might look more like not coming in at curfew, not following the house rules, or being mean to other people. I think always blaming others for things instead of taking responsibility might be on that list. So there's a list of criteria that meet the ODD requirement.
Okay.
I think it's funny how you said the ODD requirement, because people would say that they come from a broken home, and like those things you listed would be the stereotypical things that they would list. And I think it's very interesting how you said people like for single mothers, because I know single mothers who have raised kids and it's just like that. And I think how you were saying the parameters that some kids learn to cook, wash dishes at elementary school, and they have these, I don't know, what you say, rude or kind of behaviors and stuff like that. I think that is so funny how like psychologists have this list and they call ODD, and somebody who wouldn't even know the term would say, oh, that the broken home kind of kid scenario and situation.
Yeah. When I first finished my master's degree, and this was my theory, is I wasn't going to label people. I wasn't going to get into diagnosing. Well, you have to. You're in the medical field, you have to follow the criteria. And so at first it was really difficult for me to diagnose kids with things, because I looked at their cultural and their environmental setting, and I'm thinking, who wouldn't have these list of issues, right? But regardless, when you're in a medical model, that's what you have to follow. And so giving someone a diagnosis helps with how to go about changing it. In my opinion, that's really the only reason it's good for, right? To diagnose someone with depression, because there's some evidence-based practice that says this is how you get out of depression. So we know exactly what to follow. We don't have to go, oh, is this going to work? Is that going to work? Where do you know what's going to work? So it defines things, yeah. I think before you got here, we were talking about how it can be totally different based on environment. What if someone's grown up in what we would say is like the perfect household? They haven't, I don't know, whatever that is in our minds, and they haven't had to really tolerate much in life at all. They've had everything pretty much go how they want, maybe they haven't learned to be resilient about anything. They haven't particularly learned good social skills, life skills, how to be independent, right?
Mm-hmm.
Independent thinker, problem solver. And what if someone has grown up with a single mom who has worked 2 jobs? Maybe the kids lived with grandparents and his mom and worked, I think the example I gave was maybe worked at his grandpa's deli since he was 10, doing all these things. He may end up growing up with more skills, life-based skills, to tolerate things than the first child I mentioned.
Right.
Right? We don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Something else I was wondering is you brought up, different backgrounds, and I don't know if your practice you see other people with different cultural backgrounds and
Mm-hmm.
Minorities or ethnicities, but I was wondering if you did, because every person's different, and you always have to approach somebody differently based off hopefully probably you guys get a little information about the person,
Mm-hmm.
so you know how to approach the situation.
Yeah.
Because we were in my class talking about how some people who were